Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, winers, diners, and oil refiners, welcome along to the Joe Spivey YouTube channel where we discuss books and little else. And welcome along if you are new. I am an obnoxious and reasonably eloquent young adult male who tries to hide that obnoxiousness through bookishness and through love of literature. So, yes, I've only been going about 3 or 4 months now, and typically, as Moore's law of technological advance would illustrate, what took us 3 months to obtain has been obtained and then doubled again and halved or whatever within the space of a couple of weeks afterwards. So we are now over 2,500 subscribers, which for somebody who has spent precisely about £40 on this whole setup just over the last 4 months is remarkable. So yes, you're very welcome. Find yourselves a partner and gather up and compare some notes. Yes, welcome along to another bookcase tour. It is ridiculously cold here in the north of Britain just now. It is -2, -3, one of those sort of lesser known, not as much charted regions of minus temperatures nowadays, which means that on an hourly basis we have to have the heating on and off, and so never have I felt the plutocratic boot of Mr. Vladimir Putin so sternly and aggressively pressed against my neck. But there we are. That's where we get our power from, folks. That's the way the world has to be. So yes, me and my Californian lighting crew, me and Chris Williamson share a bunch of guys that just come around sporadically to our house and make sure that our videos are aesthetically pleasing and are fitting some of the YouTube's algorithms. We've been struggling with the light because obviously I'm getting further and further down with these bookshelf tours, and yeah, so hopefully if I do look like a sort of a Romanian nobleman who's just put down a deposit on a house in the north or on the north coast of England, who's got an English lawyer down to his Romanian mansion. If I look like Vlad the Impaler, then apologies for that. It's not my fault. It's my lighting team's fault. But anyway, let us press on with at least this half of the shelf. Hopefully, you've already spotted some titles which will get you going. The first one is Tyler Hamilton and Daniel Coyle. This is The Secret Race. Presumably ghostwritten by Daniel Coyle, given that Tyler Hamilton was for many, many decades a professional cyclist. But having listened to Tyler in interviews, he's an American from Massachusetts, I wouldn't be surprised if he contributed a paragraph or two of his own. He's not so indolent as many celebrities are to has essentially given the entire burden to an employed writer. I think he could quite well, as I say, have contributed at least a few chapters to this. He's quite eloquent for a sportsman, yes, he was, as this picture would detail, as you might infer from it, one of the many loyal lieutenants and teammates of Lance Armstrong when he was riding for the US Postal Team, probably between the years of about 1998 to 2002. Then he went off to a rival team and started competing against Lance on a different team. Few bits about this book. He is refreshingly self-critical. Many of the people of this era, many of the cyclists of this era who've committed their stories to memoirs have been dishonest, or at least sort of strangely sophistic in some of their ruminations about moral right and wrong. The fact that somehow because you entered a system or a social milieu, an environment in which injecting yourself with erythropoietin or human growth hormone or goodness knows, or taking a significant quantity of your blood, a pint of your blood, into a bag and freezing it and then reintroducing it into your system at a later date for oxygenated advantage was normal. Just because that was normal and done by everybody, that was therefore, whilst you consulted your moral North Star, the best thing and the most advisable thing to be doing. Hamilton doesn't do that. He says that he has, many skeletons in his closet. He was just as has now got just as many misgivings about his behaviour. Many, many decades ago. My opinions on Lance Armstrong are reasonably well voiced. It's not the fact that he doped and defrauded many, many millions of pounds and dollars out of a paying public that I despise him, but simply because of his demonstrously evil, pernicious, arrogant, self-satisfying behaviour when it came to obfuscating the truth and making sure that every single dissident that spoke out against him was villainised. And somehow he's managed to rehabilitate his reputation and now has a YouTube channel of his own. But this is jolly good. This is about, Tyler's journey to professional cycling and how very difficult it was under the stewardship of a doctor at the US Postal Team called Michele Ferrari, who I think still operates today. He's now known as Dr. Death. But yeah, this is a reasonably short thing that I ripped through. As sports books go, it's really, really, really nice. And as many of you know, I was an aspiring professional cyclist not too long ago, about 4 or 5 years ago. Next up, we have a Wordsworth classic. This is Thomas Hardy's Test of the D'Urbervilles, one book that I reviewed in rigorous detail for Victober, one of the last ones that I did. I've read Far From the Madding Crowd and Test of the D'Urbervilles from Hardy. I have recently acquired Jude the Obscure, which I referred to in one of my recent book hauls. But yeah, I enjoyed many of the passages. I like the setup, the whole idea that there is a poor family that has been deceived by another nobleman into believing that they are perhaps, some of the estranged relatives of a noble family in and of itself. It's a nice concept, but I think it's a little bit supercilious when dealing with the lower classes. Mr. Hardy, I don't think he, much like Trollope really, I don't think he sort of gets the poor very much. He just thinks of them as mindless, gutter-dwelling troglodytes, and doesn't give them an awful lot of individuality or perspicuity at all. But yeah, reasonably well written. This particular copy is many, many years old because I studied it for will it be an A-level or GCSE? The equivalent just before you go to college, in high school, essentially, for you Americans. I studied it. It was forced upon us. And without having finished the novel, I managed to get myself an A-star, which just goes to show the, what would it show? The rigorous nature of our assessment systems. So that's Test of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. Next up we have Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. And yes, something that I haven't read, unfortunately. It's been on my shelves for a while now, something I've never got around to. That is unbelievably disadvantageous for this lighting. I'm surprised you can even see the book there before you. Yes, obviously the Catch-22 situation, famed now as a cliche for a difficult decision or stuck between a rock and a hard place, whereby your commitment to one cause will almost certainly directly affect the other cause in a negative way, something like that. But I've never got through this. I think it's just got a load of praise on the back. Hilarious and tragic, at the heart of Catch-22 is a savage indictment of 20th century madness and a desire of the ordinary man to survive it. I do hate it when people refer to men and women as ordinary, because I would quite like to know just what it is that people believe ordinary men to be. I think it's a very, very, as I've said before, supercilious thing to, or very snobbish and dismissive thing to think of. Sociopolitically, are people ordinary? Okay, so he earns £30,000 a year, right? Okay, does he have any, did he have some very different speculations to other people? Probably. Does he live different lives to other people? Probably. Does he love his wife for different reasons? Probably. I don't like it when people talk about ordinary men. But anyway, savage indictment of 20th century madness and a desire of the ordinary man to survive it. That's Catch-22, with a very glossy and shiny cover, as I'm sure you saw. Let me just arrange those so that they're back correctly. Next up we have Frank Herbert's Dune in I think this is a special, it says now major motion picture on the front. 50th anniversary edition. The spine is cracked to bits. I've read this, I think, twice now. I really, really, really enjoyed it. You've got the... obviously, it's what is it? It's an intergalactic saga whereby the eponymous Dune planet, the Arrakis planet, is the home to these... wiry sort of penile worms, and it also happens to be a depository of melange or spice, which is the chief commodity for the world, and without which interstellar travel is impossible, yada yada yada. And it's got the House Atreides, who are brought in to marshal that planet by the Emperor, and House Harkonnen, under the command of Baron Harkonnen, who is a pustuled and bald malefactor, as well you might expect. And yeah, it's just about the intertwinations of that type of thing. Paul Atreides, who is the young heir of the Atreides family, is sort of very, very often mysteriously believed to be some sort of son and heir to all sorts of things, of the female Bene Gesserit, and also to House Atreides. So it's it's really, 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 very good. If you don't like sort of lots of the sections in Lord of the Rings with Galadriel and the spiritualism and all of the kind of wishy-washy, nebulous nature of feeling with a capital F, then you might not be an enormous fan of it. There's an awful lot of that sort of, religiosity almost, and spiritualism. You might not be a huge fan, but it is definitely worth it. Next up, we have Adam Higginbottom's Midnight in Chernobyl. This was buy one, get one half price, as it says on the sticker there. The untold story of the world's greatest nuclear disaster. And I think this came off the back of the hit HBO series featuring... That's, I think, he's Swedish or Norwegian bloke that's really, really excellent. The old, and of course, Jared Harris as well. This is the international bestseller. The dramatic true story of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster, based on original reporting and interviews with survivors. Early in the morning of April 26th, 1986, reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl atomic energy station exploded, triggering history's worst nuclear disaster. Much has been written about the incident, but the real story, clouded from the beginning by secrecy, propaganda and misinformation, has long remained in dispute. Now, this was gotten hold of by myself many years ago. Again, pretty much when I was in the clutches of in the daggers of secondary school education, and me and my friend then, who hadn't read so much as a greeting card since we were the age of 4, and hadn't written so much as a shopping list since we were 4, then had to write a 1,000-word piece, a journalistic inquiry on a book, and we happened upon this, and I think I remember enjoying it. There's a few pictures in the middle, which almost certainly will have been a nice sort of bridging gap, will have bridged the gap for me. But yeah, I can't remember an awful lot about this. So sorry, I'm not terribly insightful. Obviously, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster is cited as the most contributive factor in the dissolution of the Soviet Union, yada, yada, yada. So that's it. Next up, we have a clump of Christopher... A clump... That's actually stayed up rather well, hasn't it? A clump of Christopher Hitchens. This is And Yet, a collection of essays. Some of it on George Orwell, some of it on... I don't know, the ineluctable benefits of smoking or something, presumably. There's everything falling... I'm just going to leave that like that. Che Guevara, Orwell, Ohio's Odd Numbers, Mikhail Lermontov, Salman Rushdie, A.N. Wilson, Ian Fleming, Oriana Fallaci, Gertrude Bell, Imperial Follies, Edmund Wilson, V.S. Naipaul, Barack Obama, Colin Powell, G.K. Chesterton, and What is Patriotism, and the Importance of Being Orwell. So that's And Yet essays. Things that Christopher will have written almost certainly cross-eyed with inebriation. Next up, we have Letters to a Young Contrarian, which I reviewed for Non-Fiction November. Good lord, this lighting's terrible. Again, with a picture of him with a cigarette in his hand. And we also have Hitch 22, a memoir. Again, that's terrible. I nearly swore then, folks. Hitch 22, a memoir. That's better. Hitch 22, a memoir. Which is at its best when it's dealing with the quotidiana of Hitchens' life, his relationship with Martin Amis and James Fenton and Salman Rushdie, at their sort of, their Thursday social club where they would go and play word games and talk about a love whose month is ever May, and, comparing thee to a summer's day and all that. You just really want to be a fly on the wall in those rooms. But then when he starts talking about... It just uses it seemingly as a vehicle to proselytise, which is a verb he wouldn't like me to use, but it's an avenue through which he proselytises about the Iraq War and Israel-Palestine, and many of the huge, nebulous, imperceptible geopolitical issues of his day, which of course he was famous for and probably best at writing. Those were the bits that I found dullest. And I did a review of this for my university paper and called it what was it? It was an immensely thesauric sweat fest, I think was the title I used, something like that. So that's Hitch 22, a memoir. Now, if we can just survive this without everything collapsing, nothing is quite like a bookshelf tour for giving you the shivers of entropic collapse. All these conspiracy theories that think that the world can be organised will look at a bookshelf and just dismay, because you remove one book and 4 or 5 start squealing and fall in on themselves, and something else collapses up front, and everything else needs rejigging. It's complete mania, folks. But yes, let me just put these down. So we have Matthew Hoggart's James Joyce: A Student's Guide. When I tried. What did I do? I tried to interpret Ulysses, I think it was, rather than just read the thing. That is unjustifiably large and unreadable. Joyce's own ideal reader was himself and nobody else. So yes, that's the Student's Guide. I have got A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man and Ulysses just down there, as well as Dubliners, which we'll get to probably in the next bookshelf tour. But that's Matthew Hoggart's James Joyce: A Student's Guide. A really nice caricature just there with an eye patch and a nose where much sputum finds a welcome home, I'm sure. Next up we have, I'm trying to get these in alphabetical order, but we might just give them out as a clump. 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. That's one of the teachers in high school, or again secondary school, that I have referenced on a few, not referenced, but given a bit of information about on this channel a few times. Drew me to, gave this book as not adequate reading, but what would you say, almost mandatory reading. We didn't actually study it in the course of the syllabus, but he was a great interdisciplinarian and would always tell us that we really ought to be doing the things that the schools tell us not to. He would walk in without shoes and would probably have smoked a pipe if the law allowed it, and talked about sexual matters, things that he shouldn't have been talking about with 13 and 14-year-olds. He recommended 1,000 Splendid Suns, which I think is, well, I might as well read the blurb. Mariam is only 15 when she is sent to Kabul to marry Rashid. Nearly 2 decades later, a friendship grows between Mariam and a local teenager, Layla, as strong as the ties between mother and daughter. When the Taliban take over, life becomes a desperate struggle against starvation, brutality, and fear. Yet love can move people to act in unexpected ways and lead them to overcome the most daunting obstacles with startling heroism. So yes, this book was one of the few books that have made me cry, folks. Again, that was when I was 18 or 19. In fact, maybe even younger than that, 16, 17. So I doubt it would do so today. Next up we have Dusts on a Track, which is by Zora Neale Hurston. First published in 1942. Dust Tracks on a Road, rather, don't know how I've misread that, is Zora Neale Hurston's candid, poignant autobiography, an imaginative and exuberant account of her rise from childhood poverty in the rural South to a prominent place among the leading artists and intellectuals of the Harlem Renaissance. So yes, this, I can't really remember an awful lot about this. This was an option to study at university. We could have written an essay on it, and because it didn't immediately jump out at me, I was a very different reader. I wasn't nearly as resilient a reader as I am now, and so will have probably spent 15 minutes with it and tossed it asunder. Yes, so that's Dust Tracks on a Road by Zora Neale Hurston. If I have missed out, folks, then please do let me know. Not too short of reading autobiographies of people I've never really heard of. Next up, I think probably finally in this particular tour, we have the vintage publication of Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This was studied at university, but I had read it 3 or 4 times before I went to university. This is probably did for 18 months to 24 months, had the accolade of being my favourite book, I think. Not because of the way it's written, not because of the exchanges in there, not because of the not because of the aesthetic brilliance of it or how nice the sentences sound, but because of the thematic things that you can take from it. I happen to agree with Aldous Huxley that we have this is a dystopian society. If you haven't read it, dystopian society, which has been ravished by technology, and the inhabitants of this world are, first of all, stratified by sort of lineal worth and their sort of mental faculties and their academic ability, alpha, betas, gammas, that type of thing, and especially the proles and the gammas right at the bottom have their emotional well-being completely regulated by a mind-altering drug called soma. Huxley also pretty much foresees the advent of what is it called? When you're test tube babies, what are they called? In vitro fertilization. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, sees that coming, and yeah, it's really, really, really very good. Sexual immorality in this book is rife. Humans are treated as essentially just bestial animals. That it is frowned upon not to consort with very many people sexually. If you, for instance, deprive yourself of some of the sexual emoluments that are in and around your area, you are frowned upon. All that type, the nuclear family and traditional sexual mores are disbanded, and obviously it's a bit of a critique of that by Huxley. There's a savage in there, tropes of the noble savage. So it's jolly good, and it's quite short as well, folks. So you guys with short attention spans are sure to rip through it even in one weekend. So I think that just about covers us, folks. That was a little bit, I think it's been a little bit unspivanian today. I don't really know why, but I have, I've gotten through some books for you, many of which I haven't actually read, and a few of which I have. And then, yes, we'll be back next time for what will be, I think, part 8, something like that. So, yes, I hope the lighting hasn't been too oppressive. I hope I have been... I at least resembled some of my earlier eloquence. I am reading and writing like an absolute madman at the moment, and so these videos aren't, they aren't prepared at all. So yes, thanks ever so much for watching BookTube, and goodbye.